Okay, well, I think you need to go right back to the beginning of British exploration, let's put it that way, which started in the Elizabethan times. We're talking here the second half of the 16th century. Originally, it was to try to develop trading routes to China. And the two trading routes that were explored by the English were through what was called the Northeast Passage, which was traveling up along the Norwegian coast and along the Russian coast to find a link to China that way. And the other way was to go through what was called the Northwest Passage, which is to go along the Greenland coast and the Canadian coast to find a route to China that way. China was and Africa and parts of India were already being explored by the Portuguese and Spanish, particularly the Portuguese. And so those routes were already being developed by them. England was trying to develop its own routes. It also tried to undermine, particularly the Spanish colonies in South America and Central America. And in order to do that, it established its own posts, basically piracy posts, really, to intercept Spanish galleons. And these were based in the West Indies. And some of those islands developed into some of the earliest colonies in what became the British Empire. Ultimately, they ended up growing crops, particularly sugarcane was quite a large exporter from those areas. Part of the original response, if you like, to the growth of the English colonies was to counteract the Spanish and Portuguese development that had taken place like 100 years or so beforehand. In addition to that, there was a lot of religious tensions in England, particularly among Puritans who were discriminated against by the Anglican Church in England. Some of those Puritan dissenters ended up settling in Ulster in Northern Ireland. Some went to the Netherlands, which was an established Protestant nation, and others went across to the New World, to what's now become the United States, and settled in and around Massachusetts, the Massachusetts area. So the early American colonies were established at the beginning of the 17th century, created by Puritans who had been sort of persecuted in England. They took with them those ideas of freedom of speech, ideas around the English common law, many things that had been developed in English society going right back to the Anglo-Saxons. So they took on board these values, and this idea of a religious angle on what became British Empire is an important feature, because it drove a lot of the colonizations in Australia and New Zealand. So the empire developed in a rather haphazard way, without really any plan, over several hundred years. The jewel in the crown of the empire was the Indian Empire, which developed again over a period of time, mainly through the actions of the East India Company. That's set up as a trading company with monopoly trading rights in the Indian Ocean and with the Indian people. India, of course, was a range of different states at that time. Some of them formed direct relationships with the East India Company. Over time, the company grew in size. It had a particularly large army, which was made up of Indian soldiers, largely. And they came to dominate the Indian continent. And this meant that some of the industries that existed in India, particularly the textile industry, fell into decline, particularly when exports from England came to dominate world markets. So in response to that, India became more of a producer of cash crops. So a strong relationship developed between Britain and India that covered a number of areas, and it went both ways. The cultural exchange, obviously, India exported a lot of goods to England, and dishes such as curries become the national dish. Indian words are incorporated into the English language. Indian art became very popular in Britain as well. And on the other side, English brought over a lot of technical know-how to the Indian continent. a lot of investment in transport infrastructure, irrigation systems, institutions of state, and also just a basic understanding of the history of India. Its ancient cultures were explored and analysed by British scientists, and a whole sort of relationship developed between the two nations, and I think persists to the modern day. I mean, there's a fascination, I think, on both sides as regarding the different cultures.